For months, astronomers reassured us. 3I Atlas was nothing more than a fleeting spectacle, a harmless wanderer from interstellar space that would skim past Mars before vanishing forever into the abyss. But the universe rarely deals in harmless. And now, James Webb, humanity's sharpest eye into the void, has shattered that illusion with data so precise it has flipped the story upside down. The calculations have shifted. The trajectory no longer looks random. And for the very first time, scientists are whispering the words no one dared to speak aloud. 3I Atlas might not miss Mars. This isn't just about a comet brushing past a planet. This is about movements that resemble deliberate maneuvers, clockwork pulses of gas, and a body that acts less like a frozen rock and more like a machine. The deeper the analysis goes, the stranger it becomes. This object isn't drifting through the solar system. It's steering, adjusting, correcting its aim. And now, the red planet lies directly in its path. Whatever 3I Atlas truly is, it is not finished with us. And the cosmos may be revealing a purpose far darker than we imagined. When it was first spotted on July 1st, the object appeared ordinary, a fast-moving blur with a faint glowing coma, racing at nearly 87 kilometers per second relative to the sun. At that speed, it could cross the Earth-Moon distance in under 80 minutes. But the true shock for scientists wasn't its staggering velocity, it was its behavior. Comets are predictable creatures. They crumble, slow, or stabilize as they fall toward the inner solar system. Yet, 3I Atlas did the opposite. It began accelerating, not wildly but subtly, steadily, with purpose. And then came the chilling twist. Its trajectory started tightening, as though invisible hands were guiding it. Astronomers watched in disbelief as its coma, the glowing shroud of gas and dust, suddenly doubled in brightness within weeks. Spectral analysis only deepened the mystery, showing violent spikes in ultraviolet energy and CO2 outgassing at levels never recorded in any comet before. This was no passive ice ball wandering through the void. It was behaving like a weapon, a guided missile honing in on a target. And then James Webb saw it. Deep field sensors detected something no natural body should ever produce: rhythmic pulses from the tail. Not chaotic jets of vaporized ice, but deliberate thrusts, firing in exact 17-minute intervals. A pattern, a signal, a maneuver. As Webb, Gemini South, and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory locked their instruments on the object, the math grew darker. What had once been calculated as a safe pass had transformed into a razor-thin approach, just 1.95 million kilometers from Mars, a cosmic hair's breadth. But worse was yet to come. Simulations revealed that even a minor boost, just 10 kilometers per second, barely a fraction of the measured thrusts, could shift its path entirely. And that shift would turn a near miss into a direct strike on the red planet. Think about that. Just a whisper of thrust, a barely measurable nudge, and Mars becomes ground zero. This degree of precision is unheard of in any natural object. 3I Atlas isn't simply venting gas into the void. It's using that outgassing like microthrusters, steering with the subtlety of an interstellar spacecraft. Even more unsettling, every single pulse is lined up perfectly with the planet's orbital plane, as though following a flight path. Scientists are no longer tracking an object. They're watching something aim. And the impact window keeps tightening. Between September 19th and 30th, any single burst of thrust could be the one that tips it over the edge. This is no longer the playground of amateur sleuths or sci-fi dreamers. The alarm bells are ringing in the highest halls of academia. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb and his team have now published a paper proposing something bold. 3I Atlas may be an engineered probe, and the data backs them. Radar pings from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and Goldstone antennas have returned metallic echoes, not the soft, watery signatures of a frozen comet, but something far denser, sharper, alien. And then there are the images. Amateur astronomers using long-exposure filters have captured green, needle-like beams. 3 glowing streams converging toward Mars, pulsing in sync with the exhaust vents. Combined with those metallic signatures, the picture becomes terrifyingly clear. Whatever 3I Atlas is, it is not behaving like a natural body. Loeb goes even further, suggesting a chilling scenario. 3I Atlas may be deliberately targeting Mars, to crash, to deliver, to seed. Whether it's probes, signals, spores, or something beyond our imagination, the intent feels surgical, not random. Mars is being approached with precision, and humanity is left as passive witnesses to an operation we cannot yet comprehend. But what happens if it actually makes impact? The numbers are staggering. With a mass of nearly 10 billion tons and a closing velocity of 57 kilometers per second, the strike would unleash over 2 million megatons of energy. That's not just bigger than any nuclear explosion on Earth. It's thousands of times greater than the most devastating detonation in our planet's history. The aftermath would be apocalyptic. A crater 60 kilometers wide and 5 kilometers deep would scar the Martian surface, while debris would be blasted into orbit, some fragments potentially flung into interplanetary space. Yes, that means some of it could one day intersect with Earth's path, but the consequences aren't limited to shattered rock and dust. Mars hosts an armada of human machines, rovers, orbiters, and laboratories dedicated to one mission: unlocking the mysteries of life and climate on another world. An impact of this scale wouldn't just destroy hardware. It would erase decades of irreplaceable research, blind critical communication arrays, and spark contamination risks no one has prepared for. The reality is undeniable. We are not ready, and the world knows it. ESA, Roscosmos, CNSA, even JAXA have quietly convened planetary defense councils, not against an armada of alien warships, but against a single interstellar visitor that is behaving disturbingly like a vehicle. For decades, scientists have wondered if Mars once breathed with life, or still hides it now. Subsurface lakes, frozen microbes, ancient ecosystems locked away beneath the permafrost. That mystery is why we've sent so many rovers, orbiters, and landers to its scarred terrain. But if 3I Atlas strikes, that mystery becomes something far more dangerous, a biological unknown. The violence of impact wouldn't just vaporize the dusty surface, it would crack open the deeper crust, splitting apart hidden layers we've never touched. Underground reservoirs could suddenly erupt into the open. And here's the nightmare. If 3I Atlas carries organic molecules, or worse, engineered biology woven into its exhaust trails, the collision could fuse alien chemistry with Martian biology. The result? Genetic contamination on a planetary scale. Some biologists are already whispering a term for this: panspermia in reverse. Not life traveling from Mars to Earth, but life seeded into Mars deliberately. Which raises the most chilling question of all: what if destruction was never the purpose? What if 3I Atlas is a delivery system, and Mars is the incubator? As the object reached its closest approach, the James Webb Telescope turned its gaze one last time, initiating an ultra-deep scan. The data was immediately locked down, classified for nearly 48 hours before scraps were allowed into the public record. But leaks from inside the Webb project paint a much darker picture. Instruments like NIRSPEC and MIRI reportedly detected traces of synthetic polymers, molecules that look eerily similar to Earth-made plastics, and even carbon nanotubes entangled with natural Martian gases. These aren't the kinds of structures that form in a vacuum or during ordinary cometary heating. These are engineered materials, the unmistakable fingerprints of design. Webb spectrographs also revealed persistent isotopic anomalies in carbon and hydrogen, unlike any signatures from known solar system objects. In plain terms, 3I Atlas contains things that should not exist in space, and every gram of it is heading for a planet that may still be alive. The findings were not released to the public. Instead, Webb's data was quietly shared with the world's major space agencies. Emergency task forces were formed, not because anyone believed we could stop it, but because time to understand it was running out. And as the panic grew, NASA made an unexpected move: silence. The usual steady stream of press releases dried up. Telemetry feeds from Perseverance and Tianwen showed strange gaps. Questions about potential impact scenarios were deflected or postponed. Something fundamental had changed behind the scenes. And then, in a classified transmission later leaked by an anonymous whistleblower, 3 words appeared: impact protocol initiated. What does that mean? No one outside the inner circle knows. But insiders claim that a series of encrypted signals were fired off from Earth-based stations toward every functioning piece of Mars hardware. A curious choice, especially considering there is no known way to deflect or intercept 3I Atlas. Unless, of course, the purpose of those signals wasn't to protect Mars, but to prepare it. If 3I Atlas is even semi-autonomous, it may be reacting to energy signatures, orbital beacons, or encoded pulses. And if Earth just activated those systems, we may have done more than simply acknowledge its presence. We may have told it that we're aware. At the SETI Institute, a small team of cryptographers tried something no one else had dared. They gathered every known data point about 3I Atlas: its trajectory, closest approach, time, velocity, and gravitational vectors, numbers available to every astronomer on Earth. Then they did the unthinkable. They translated those values into binary, the universal language of machines, and ran them through the same compression algorithms we use to send deep space messages. What emerged was not noise, it was structured, it was repeating. Buried within the sequence lay a string of numerical intervals, corresponding to atomic numbers 6, 8, 14, 26, carbon, oxygen, silicon, iron, the elemental scaffolding of both life and technology. Interspersed between these were prime number countdowns and spacings eerily consistent with recursive messaging protocols. In short, the entire flight path of 3I Atlas might not be a simple trajectory at all. It may be a signal in motion, not a radio transmission, but a message encoded through behavior, through timing, through presence itself. This would change everything. We're not just watching an object on course for Mars. We're witnessing a communicative event. The impact window isn't just a danger zone. It could be part of the message. If it strikes, that's one sentence. If it misses, that's another. Either way, the answer has already been written in the stars. And as the projected impact corridor narrowed, planetary scientists noticed a detail that sent chills through the room. 3I Atlas's updated trajectory now crossed directly over a slender corridor above Elysium. Pia, an unusually young geological region of Mars, has long puzzled researchers for its strangely perfect terrain. Satellite surveys show concentric ridges, spiral-like flows, and surface formations echoing the Fibonacci sequence with unsettling precision. These features weren't new, but what electrified scientists was that the exact vector of 3I Atlas's descent aligned with the heart of this zone, a perfectly circular basin less than 3.5 kilometers wide. No meteorite origin, no volcanic residue. Yet at its center lay a deposit of crystalline silicates with refractive properties unknown anywhere else on Mars. When struck by solar radiation, these crystals flash brief pulses of infrared light in timed intervals, long dismissed as a quirky geological curiosity. But now, with 3I Atlas locked on course, the question feels unavoidable. Is this basin just an accident of geology or a beacon, a rendezvous point? And if so, who placed it there? As James Webb repositioned to a new vantage to reacquire 3I Atlas, its sensors caught something no one expected. Behind the main body of the object, at a steady 0.07 astronomical units, moved a secondary shadow. It wasn't a debris cloud, it wasn't gas, it was something darker, emptier than the void itself. Radar returned nothing, infrared registered no warmth, but photometric readings showed a sharp, consistent dip in starlight, an object or field moving in perfect synchronization with 3I Atlas as though tethered to it by an invisible cord. The shadow kept its distance with eerie perfection, unbothered by gravity, acceleration, or any force that should have nudged it off course. When plotted in polar coordinates, it drew a flawless orbital trace, a dark echo moving in absolute lockstep with 3I Atlas. This wasn't an escort, it wasn't a herd, it was a mirror. Speculation erupted overnight. Was it a secondary craft, a drone, a gravitational phantom, or something stranger, a field, a memory, a protocol running alongside the main body? For the first time, researchers began to whisper an even more unsettling idea. 3I Atlas might not be the primary actor at all, but merely the carrier for something more elusive. And as the projected impact window drew near, a chilling pattern emerged. When scientists mapped every key moment of 3I Atlas's journey, its closest approaches to the Sun, Earth, and now Mars, they discovered that each fell on astronomical resonance dates: September 23rd, October 5th, November 11th. Not just seasonal equinoxes or planetary transits, but rare gravitational synchronizations that cycle only once every 54 years. The last time the inner planets shared this arrangement during a comet's passage was in 1908, the year of the Tunguska event, a blast so powerful it leveled 2,000 square kilometers of Siberian forest. The synchronicity sent a tremor through the scientific community. How could a random interstellar visitor arrive at such exquisitely tuned moments? Unless it wasn't random, unless it was timing itself, as though following a clock not built by human hands. This wasn't celestial coincidence anymore. This was a pattern. And in the cosmos, patterns are never accidents. They're the fingerprint of design. But one final revelation hurled the discussion into territory once dismissed as fringe: consciousness in motion. At Princeton, a neurocosmology team studying brainwave synchronization during deep meditative states stumbled on something extraordinary. When volunteers were exposed to the pulsation frequencies emitted by 3I Atlas's light curve, especially the 17-minute gas vent intervals, their neural activity began to lock in. Not in one subject, but across multiple, in separate rooms. isolated, unaware of one another. This wasn't simple resonance. This was neurological entrainment, as though the signal from 3I Atlas wasn't just mechanical, but cognitive. And if something can reach across millions of kilometers to influence our minds, what does that imply about its origin? What if 3I Atlas is not a rock, not a spacecraft, but a thought moving through the universe, a seed of awareness, a message you don't just read, but feel, something that becomes part of you the instant you perceive it? In that sense, the impact on Mars, physical or not, could be only the symptom. The real event may already be happening inside us. As fear surrounding the potential strike escalated, a small, secretive circle of archaeo-astronomers began combing through ancient sky maps, not only from Western observatories, but from Babylonian, Mayan, and Tibetan cosmology scrolls. What they uncovered defied belief. Across cultures separated by oceans and millennia, a recurring motif emerged: the flame serpent. Ancient records describe a celestial body descending from the outer dark, curving unnaturally close to the sun, before setting its sights on the red god, Mars. The same serpentine path appeared in stela carvings, temple murals, even cave etchings. But one artifact stood above the rest: a pre-Incan calendar stone unearthed in Anaco. Etched into its surface were 4 radiant lines erupting outward from Mars after the comet's descent. When modern researchers ran the markings through photogrammetry, the results were chilling. The pattern aligned almost perfectly with Webb's projected debris dispersion if 3I Atlas were to strike Mars. What does this mean? That somehow, someone anticipated this, not in this century, but thousands of years ago. It suggests 3I Atlas isn't just passing through history. It might be history itself repeating. And perhaps, Mars isn't the target, it's the trigger. Then came the shock no one expected. After days of silence due to power conservation, the ExoMars Trace gas orbiter detected a sudden spike of xenon isotopes in Mars's upper atmosphere. At first, scientists blamed solar radiation, but the ratios were wrong, completely wrong. This wasn't arriving from above, it was rising from below. Deep fissures near Cerberus Fossae, one of the most geologically unstable regions on the planet, had come alive. Seismic activity surged. Subsurface temperatures climbed by 3 degrees Kelvin in mere hours. And in a twist that froze the scientific community, in stunned silence, the readings arrived. Magnetometers picked up a faint but structured magnetic pulse, repeating every 17 minutes, the exact interval of 3I Atlas's gas emissions. Suddenly, the question shifted. It was no longer if the object would impact Mars. It became, is Mars already preparing for it? As though the planet itself wasn't being threatened, but activated. Something deep in the crust, dormant for millennia, had begun to stir. With every passing hour, the idea of impact morphed from a physical event into something far stranger, a temporal one. Webb's team noticed that light fluctuations from 3I Atlas no longer matched normal cometary spin. Instead, they pulsed in a recursive layered timing sequence. 7 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause, 13 pulses. These numbers weren't random. When plotted, they formed a Fibonacci-based spiral, the same pattern found in organic growth, memory encoding, even the coiling of human DNA. Mathematicians and cryptographers joined forces to decode it, and their conclusion was chilling. 3I Atlas wasn't just signaling, it was transmitting time, but not in seconds or hours, in cycles, in peaks, in pulses. The object wasn't simply arriving, it was synchronizing. And the countdown, it turned out, wasn't to a moment of impact at all, it was to resonance, a convergence of orbit, energy, and consciousness. And when that countdown ends, it may not unleash an explosion. It may trigger something far more profound, a shift in perception, or perhaps in the very framework of reality itself. In the final 72 hours before the projected impact, something extraordinary was detected. A signal, low frequency, infrasonic, beyond the range of human hearing, but clear as day in its waveform. And its origin stunned everyone. It wasn't coming from deep space. It wasn't even reflecting off Mars. It was rising from beneath Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. This colossus, long thought geologically dead, suddenly emitted a structured harmonic frequency. Independent confirmation came from orbiters operated by ESA, NSA, and NASA. The signature matched no known natural phenomenon. Yet when the data was isolated and rendered as a spectrogram, it formed a spiral, an almost perfect mirror of the waveform emitted by 3I Atlas during its closest pass to the Sun. For the scientific community, the silence was deafening. What does it mean when a planet seems to answer an object before it even arrives? Is Olympus Mons simply echoing back a signal, or is it communicating? Could Mars itself have been waiting for this precise alignment, for this exact moment in cosmic time? And the question no one dared voice aloud: if this is Mars waking up, what happens when it finally opens its eyes? As the countdown pressed on, another revelation surfaced from a dusty archive. A forgotten thermal scan captured nearly 2 decades ago by the Mars Odyssey orbiter. At the time, it was dismissed as a glitch, solar reflection noise. But buried beneath the plains of Utopia Planitia, the data showed a faint, pulsing heat signature. Now, rescanned in the shadow of 3I Atlas's approach, that faint signature had grown into something undeniable, something alive. The pattern had not only returned, it had grown. Its new form matched an ancient glyph, etched into the stone walls of the D&M fossa, a glyph so faint it was nearly invisible to the naked eye. It depicted a descending spiral colliding with a circle, and 2 planetary spheres aligned at the moment of contact. The implications were staggering. Mars might not simply be a planet of rock and storms. It might hold a memory, not just geological, but celestial, encoded across eons. What if Mars isn't merely a world? What if it's a recording device, and 3I Atlas is the playback key? Then something impossible happened. High-resolution imagery from ESA's Mars Express captured movement in the dust fields south of Noctis Labyrinthus. Not wind, not rover tracks, something rising, a pattern forming in the sand. 2 perfect concentric ovals expanded outward as if being carved from below. Over 4 tense hours, the shapes elongated and shifted until they formed an unmistakable image, an eye tilted precisely 23.5 degrees, Earth's axial tilt. The symbolism was overwhelming, an eye watching us, or a mirror reflecting us. Scientists scrambled for explanations, but none came. Mars had just blinked, not metaphorically, not poetically, but physically, deliberately. Something beneath its surface was not only aware, but aware of us, our geometry, our orientation, our signal. And most disturbingly of all, it acted as if this entire event had been anticipated, perhaps even requested, long before our species ever looked up and named the stars. In one of the final readings before signal blackout, the James Webb Space Telescope completed a high-resolution spectral breakdown of the molecular trail trailing 3I Atlas. Among the volatile organics and exotic carbon chains lay something that sent a tremor through every astrobiology lab on Earth, a repeating strand of nucleobase sequences. Not exactly RNA, not Earth-born, but unmistakably structured for replication, a foreign form of prebiotic information embedded in the vapor drifting across interplanetary space. As scientists began mapping its spiraling pattern, an even more horrifying possibility emerged. It wasn't merely biological, it was responsive. Segments of the strand mirrored human-designed encryption keys. Other stretches mimicked known musical intervals, as if the molecule itself had been engineered to interact with intelligence, to answer, to adapt, to respond to interpretation. This was no passive cometary dust. It was a living code, built not to survive space, but to transmit through it. Life not as cells, but as language. As 3I Atlas entered its final trajectory arc, the Global Astronomy Network recorded one last alignment. Mars, Earth, and the Sun would form a perfect straight line, with 3I Atlas poised to intersect the axis at the precise instant of solar transit. This wasn't an orbital accident. The projection mirrored the ancient megalithic alignments etched into our planet: Stonehenge, Naksh, Irustam, Tiwanaku, all oriented to the same triad of celestial angles. For millennia, humans have unknowingly built monuments pointing to this very configuration. And now, at the edge of history, the alignment was about to repeat, not as myth, but as mechanism. Mars, the red witness; Earth, the awakened observer; the Sun, the eternal source; and 3I Atlas. Not an object, not a rock, but a keystone falling into the lock of planetary memory. The final position isn't about destruction, it's about completion. And when it aligns, the change won't be out there, it will be in here. We looked up at the sky and thought we saw a comet, a rogue rock, a wandering fragment from some forgotten corner of the galaxy. We named it 3I Atlas. We tracked its numbers. We mapped its arc. We convinced ourselves it was random. But what the James Webb Telescope revealed was never randomness. It was ritual. This object didn't just arrive. It performed. It aligned. It responded. And as it crossed the solar system, every planet it passed began to whisper back. Signals, pulses, alignments, codes. Mars didn't just react. It remembered. as if this wasn't its first encounter, as if this moment had been scripted into the bones of the planets themselves, the dust of craters, the pulse of gravity. And now, with one final maneuver, 3I Atlas has taken position not to destroy, but to complete something. A pattern, a countdown, a convergence. Mars may be the stage, but Earth, we are the audience. And we were never meant to be passive observers. We were always part of the design. Every telescope we built, every signal we sent, every theory we mocked, all of it was heard. The final impact may not be physical, it may not leave a crater, but it has already begun to reshape what we thought we knew about Mars, about life, about ourselves. Because in the end, 3I Atlas didn't come from Mars. It came for our attention. And now that it has it, we must ask, what happens next? Subscribe because this story is far from over. Turn on notifications because what comes next won't be televised. Share this video with someone who still thinks we're alone. And tell us in the comments, do you believe 3I Atlas was an accident or an invitation?